You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome back, and welcome to Soccer Today. A little later today, but we had to sort of recover from the weekend. Kevin Laramee joins me in Montreal, as always. I'm Duane Rollins. How you doing, Kevin? Did you enjoy the first weekend back?
I did enjoy the first weekend back, Duane, and we've been quite busy this weekend. 4 brand new shows on the website, a new Scuderia F1 pit stop news update, as well as a debut show, A League of Our Own, a show hosted by Duane, actually, about Toronto Wolfpack, the rugby playing in League One rugby league in England. So a lot of brand new content, and of course, Off the Woodworks and the first edition of MLS Postgame Show, Duane, where I literally go through all the scores, talk about goals, and it wasn't meant to be, but it became last night a call-in show, and I will be back with the open lines. So every Sunday, 1 a.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Pacific's lines will be open. We'll be giving you all you need to get your MLS fix for your Monday morning commute.
Precisely, and so you tune into that, A League of Our Own. As I said, I was happy to do that with my friend Jan. We're sort of doing it in the Finding Toronto format. If you know what that podcast was, where we sort of the two English guys that sort of learned about the sport, MLS specifically, by talking about it, by having a podcast every week. So that's kind of what Jen and I are going to do with that one. And the Wolfpack got off with they edged the London Scholars 76-0 on the weekend too.
Yeah, well, you know what? They're very good, and they had some great results, and they have a lot of ambition. No, this is not a Wolfpack podcast, but because I've researched because of the show, Duane, I wanted to know what I was gonna be publishing, and it was like interesting to me how they were denied a club. They were trying to buy a Premier League club. They were denied. Said, you know what? We're gonna invest those resources, even though we're gonna start in League One, to get to the Premiership very quickly in the world of rugby.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And as you said, it's not a Wolfpack podcast, but I think it does have some crossover appeal. So I encourage you to listen to that, where we actually, Jen and I will probably be talking about sort of what it's going to be like this year with probably a lot of blowouts, and 76-0 to start their journey up to the Super League in good style. But let's turn our attention to Major League Soccer now, which is our bread and butter, of course. Kevin, only 1 goal scored in 3 Canadian games, and 3 games involving Canadian teams this weekend. Unfortunately for the Impact, it was against them.
Yep.
The other 2 scores were 0-0. So
And
why don't we start?
it was a beautiful chip by Dupoy, but the mistake was made a mistake. It's a mistake in a way that he didn't react to the ball correctly, Patrice Beignet, when that pass was coming his way. Wondolowski beat him to it, fed Dupoy. Dupoy chipped Evan Bush. Evan Bush was already advanced because he had just passed the ball to Kamara, which passed him to Bernier, and Bernier made a mistake. So it was a tough weekend for the Canadian team, especially when you're talking about goals scored. But Duane, even Montreal with their 1-0 defeat, what was interesting to me is the midfield. I think the Patrice Bernier example here, it's almost that game in a nutshell. There's been confusion. There were collisions, literally. Bernier, Donadel, running into each other, not necessarily knowing. And that's usually an indicative of a team that's learning to play a new style. We use that word loosely, but the Montreal Impact are not going to become Barcelona. They're not going to go to tiki-taka, but you did see the blueprint and the schematics of a team with a little bit more ball possession in mind, and it does have some growing pains, especially in the midfield.
Yeah, and look, there's an inclination of clubs to try stuff out in the early part of the season, because MLS is very forgiving in the sense that more than half the teams make the playoffs. So obviously you're going to experiment a little bit early, and think we saw some growing pains for a few different teams this weekend. LA didn't look that great either. We'll talk about the American teams, I think, in the second block. But certainly with the nils on the board on the score sheet, that was a bit disappointing for that. But let's continue with the Impact. What was your overall take in terms of their play? I mean, it 1-0 loss on the road across the continent. If you look historically at those results, they're often challenging anyway. First game, so it gets a little more attention. But were you happy with the Impact's play? Did you think
No, I was not necessarily happy with the play. It was difficult for Montreal. They really were second on the Wolves. They were getting beat up in the midfield. And unfortunately, with the Cabrera injury, it kind of changes the plan. And the way Montreal is supposed to play, they don't have those players. They're the three players that were missing, basically, for that game. Andres Romero, Adrian Aregi, and Victor Cabrera, all for different reasons. Andres Romero is coming back from a very long injury, so they're taking it slowly, and hopefully everything is fine on his side. And you have Adrian Aregi, which his paperwork's not finalized yet, so he couldn't make his debut last Saturday. On top of it, Victor Cabrera got injured late and had to be replaced. Asun Kamara took his place in the center back position, having practiced though the last few weeks at right back. So you're talking about instincts, not necessarily tuned in perfectly to the position that he was going to start at a day's not even notice. And Chris Duval started on the right flank and right side, right back. That back line for me has the potential of being a very good one, but you need to have your A1. And I think the four that actually started are not the preferred lineup that I would like to see. Oyongo, Duane, is the first name that I write on my starting 11 sheet every single week. If I was Mauro Biello, I believe Oyongo could be, if not already is, the best left back in Major League Soccer. But you do have some growing pains as well. Asun Kamara, 2 yellows, got sent off at the 66th minute with the second yellow. But that brings me to a point I want to talk to you, Duane. Like, for the knee back wasn't easy, but Toledo gave a lot of early yellows, and it was actually a trend in the whole league. And those yellows early could become very dangerous. If you look at the Toronto game, Jovinko Altador got a yellow. Montreal, you had Chris Duval and Asun Kamara early getting a yellow, and for Asun Kamara, turned out to be lethal because he got the second yellow. The second one was very deserved. But it's always those first ones, the early yellows, especially in the first game of the season. It's almost like a directive has been handed down to the referees.
It's not almost. I think there has been. If you look across the board, as you said, there's so many cards given out this weekend, and only to 10 or 11 in the TFC game.
Early, that's what I mean. Like 17 minutes into the season, a tackle that's like even the fringe of yellow card. Usually, you're like, all right, well, things are going to settle. No, boom, and that could become like, what if a few yellows and then somebody gets suspended already? And well, Kamara is suspended already, so that's happening. That might be another interesting point, though. The back line for Saturday. Hopefully, Cabrera can play. Juan Lefebvre wasn't able to make the trip. He's questionable as well. So the back line defensively could be a question for Montreal in their home opener versus Seattle.
Yeah. The card, just to go back on the cards again, if you remember last year when they were calling all of the reds for the, what some people would argue were borderline tackles, if any sort of stud was showing at all, it seemed to draw red almost instantly, I should say, last season at the start. But then, of course, as this it often does, it faded off. So that's the question. Is this like an early season? The refs have been told this, so they're going to be full of the piss and vinegar to start the season. And then, like always, they'll filter it down. And by the end of the year, the star players will still be getting kicked every game to try and rein them in without any consequences to that. So it gets frustrating as an observer of the league to see that. And the refereeing is something that we talk about a lot because, like the league itself, I think the referees are developing at a similar pace. And it's frustrating when you watch world-class referees and then you instantly, they make mistakes too, but then you go to watch these guys, which are somewhere a little below world-class, right? So it gets frustrating.
Just like the players. I think it's very fitting, like you mentioned. It's like the entire thing is equal in a way. And pro as an association, I think it's a movement forward that there's a body that's trying to change things. And if you go back to a week and a half ago when Peter Walton had his teleconference, he did mention that there will be some rules looked at it differently. But he mentioned again the treatment of referee and the large dissent. There's been a lot of yellow cards for dissent. But as always, Duane, the big DP stars that goes see the referee and start complaining and blinding and saying F words, they don't get those yellows. And if there's I think it's fitting, there was a survey, the annual survey with the players.
Yeah.
88% of MLS players believe that the DPs do have a favorable treatment by the referee, especially when it's concerning their dissent or their lashing out to the referee and their group of treatment. When they're the responsible, the culprit, they never really get anything from it.
Yeah, that's human nature, I think, to a certain extent too. Not so much that I think that they're purposely going out with the intention to allow these guys more, but they get like sort of a level of respect that that maybe
Benefit
they
of the
should
doubt?
get, maybe they haven't earned. Yeah,
Maybe like the benefit of the doubt, instead of assuming that he did it intentionally, like, okay, it's him. I know his reputation is not supposed to be that way. When it's Joe Blow, you don't know, just got signed and just began playing in the league, you might be more inclined to assume the worst and not the best.
yeah, and like, look, but put yourself in their shoes. These are guys getting what, like $2,000 a game. They're gonna pull a card out to Andrea Pirlo, right? Like the guy they probably grew up watching.
Why not? I would.
Yeah.
You know what? It's your chance. Be famous. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. That's the exact opposite of what you want a referee to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
We should actually tell that to Baldo Toledo, though, but that's something else. Hey, Baldo, how are you?
Toledo is a swear word in MLS circles in most people's mind. He certainly does. The old adage about you want your referees to be invisible, do not apply with Toledo. Everyone knows that name. He's probably more famous than half the players in this league. That's not for a good reason, but
yeah, but it makes it fun, and we talk about often, Duane. Like, even though they have some bad games, they have some good games too, and we all know those big, like Toledo or Petrescu, and we have witnessed games refereed by them that were actually very done properly. So a lot of times I'll bring back my French expression. It's a contest of circumstances. It's sometimes, it's intangibles mixing together and you have a bad game and it happens.
Yeah, look, I think like any referee and anywhere in the world, consistency is what they maybe struggle with the most. But certainly, I think sometimes we're a little too quick to focus on the referee as an excuse for our team that we support poor play. That's we'll end with the impact of this. I mean, as the story of this weekend for the Canadian teams is nil. And there were nil goals by Montreal. Is it worrisome to you that the attack wasn't able to produce?
What was worrying to me is when Piatti was isolated, like the service was cut almost 100% to Mancosu. And Mancosu was not necessarily getting the same type of service he was used to in the playoffs last year. It was a different type of service, and they do have to play a little higher up. And if they don't necessarily get the ball to transition to that final tier of the pitch to get the service to Mancosu, he's not the type of player that can create that space like we other players, meaningly Didier Drogba. It's a different way to get when you have more possession and you're trying to go up on the field, it is a different way to serve your striker. And Mancosu hasn't been able to be served that way because the midfield was blocked, and when they were trying to use the flank, it was not possible. Piatti was isolated on one side. Argiro wasn't able to use the space and speed that he does have in his advantage. But a positive point to finish this game. I think probably the highlight of the Montreal Impact first game of the season is the debut of Baluta Blanc for the Montreal Impact. Came in late for Argiro, and that will be a player to keep an eye on. Baluta Blanc is consistently getting praises on training since the beginning of training camp. And we will see how much playing time he will get. Because, Duane, we talked about the Montreal Impact, but the bench of the Montreal Impact on Saturday was so thin. Majority of players would barely, if not none, MLS experience. Carl Fischer, David Chouanière, Louis Belangolette, Baluta Blanc, Maxime Crépeau. And that was the bench for Montreal on Saturday. So maybe needing to trust them and make them play more to create offensive threats out of certain players in that pool that I just mentioned, or we can't wait for the certain injury that I talked earlier to come back, because the bench of Montreal was really thin and Marabiel didn't really have any weapons, quote unquote, to bring back late to maybe get that equalizer for Montreal.
Key of MLS 3.0 is getting value and quality from your young kids that are free on the cap, and Bleu is going to be a key component. Someone we've been hearing a lot about in recent days. So sort of another young Canadian to watch moving forward. Speaking of young Canadians, why don't we take a quick break, come back, and we're going to fire up that Alphonso Davies hype train a bit more.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The Alphonso Davies hype train. We need a bumper.
We need the Alphonso Davies podcast, but that's something else. Duane, you probably saw, you said you watched the game too, when Alphonso Davies was running on the sideline and he overtook the player of the Union who actually slid and took the linesman out, and the ball was actually kept in and he was running. Did you see the smile on his face when he turned around and it was called back? How much fun the kid is having, how amazing he thought it was to, oh my God, I'm running away with the ball, going close to net in Major League Soccer. It's a home opener. Oh, godly, this is fun. That enthusiasm is so refreshing.
Yeah. Well, he's 16, man, and he's living the life. You'd have to be pretty exciting to do that. He's a freak.
What were you doing when you're 16? I know we said that before. I know what I was doing, and it was nothing close to being a professional athlete.
Yeah. I was a right fullback for my high school team, and when I was 16, and not even particularly very good at that level. So
I was actually playing sports, and not necessarily a high level, but I was playing American football at that time. But yeah, I could not even begin to comprehend what it would be like to be a professional athlete at that level, at that age.
Okay. Like I said, I'd love to be that athletic just once, for like 20 seconds, just to feel what it feels
just
like.
give me one game with your skill set and your height, please.
Yeah. What Davies, to be serious about it for a second here, I think there's that instinct he showed in the CCL game to score the goal there. The way he sort of took a step to his left before he deposited the ball in the back of the net, that was just a wherewithal that you just don't normally see. You don't see that with veterans sometimes, that sort of instinct to be calm and to slow things down when you're in front of goal. The tendency is to speed things up, and as much as he is athletic, I do think there is a football brain there too, and it's very exciting to watch him play. The national team questions are getting louder because he doesn't have full Canadian citizenship yet, so he can't represent Canada at the international level. There's no indication that he's going to go to Liberia, which is where he has eligibility for it, and represent them anytime soon. He has been in camps for the under 20s when he's been able to, because you can play in friendlies and that. But a very intriguing prospect, and hopefully this guy can get that passport situation settled pretty quick so that we can see him in Canadian colors sooner rather than later. But the Whitecaps fans, they got him now, and he's kind of got the opportunity because there are some injuries there, but I can't argue for him to not be on the pitch. It's hard to see him losing that spot anytime soon.
I think that's why he's playing, Duane. I think that's why Robinson has to play him. Why? Okay. If you're another player of that team and you watch the kid in training and he's better than everyone and he's giving in more effort and he's giving more consistency and more dedication, even though he's young and there's a chance of error, but even that, a chance of mistake, we haven't seen that chance come to fruition yet. It's been a few months now. We've seen him play on a pretty high level. That didn't happen. So if you want to be consistent with your other players by telling him, if you practice hard and are the best player and are showing me what I need to see, you'll be starting this team. You kind of have to make the kids play because he's giving you all the right answers. He's acing every test. You cannot not make him play. So you have to make him play.
Yeah, precisely. The other side of the question for the Whitecaps in the last two games, we'll conclude the CCL with it because it came so quickly apart, was they were able to keep 2 straight clean sheets. And I think that might be something that if you want to look half full on this, and certainly a draw at home is not ideal, but nonetheless, it's better than a loss. And they kept that clean sheet. And Onstad had a hell of a save in there. We thought maybe he had a bit of an off season last year. So there was good potential in the last 2 games from what I've seen from him that maybe he's bounced back or is going to bounce back and have a more season that we're used to. So the clean sheet side of things, I think, is positive for the Whitecaps. Can't find a lot of goals just yet, but got an exciting young prospect as we're talking about, and a point in the board, which a lot of draws this week, and there's a lot of early season football kind of happening. So
yeah,
you take what you get and you move on.
And if you, like you say, mention those 2 games together, because it's 2 games in 4 days, basically. They did have 2 goals in the CCL game. You did have Monteros making his Whitecaps account open, and Davies. So you do have some success. You do so it's basically you didn't concede and you scored twice in 2 games. A lot of teams will take that. And it's a very positive beginning of the season, which is, you know what, across the board, not to prove every pundit wrong, included ourselves, but the Earthquakes, Houston, and Vancouver won.
Yeah, there you go. And the Atlanta lost. They had a lot of hype going in. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second.
I hope you actually did what you said you were going to do Friday, and that's put Portland players in your fantasy because, oh Lord.
Yeah. That's we might as well talk about that now.
We should touch on TFC right after as well. So.
Yeah, well, we'll get into TFC. Look, again, we'll go TFC now first because that is our focus, obviously. But TFC was dominant in that game. Javinko had TFC's now missed their last 2 penalties, by the way, if you want to be a TFC basher. That's a funny little joke. But
yeah, what was it? Justin Morrow off the woodworks.
Yeah, someone I was at halftime, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I made that joke, and they should have let Morrow take it, and we just both kind of laughed. And that sort of, if you don't laugh, you'll cry, right? It's like, so you just move on. But no, a point on the road in a place that TFC's had a lot of struggles with in the past. I think that everyone was frustrated that it's now, in addition to that joke, it's now been 2 straight games since they've scored. Bainey made a point of starting the exact same lineup as the MLS Cup final, too. People picked up on that. And certainly they were full marks for most of that game and pretty much in control. Salt Lake only had the 1 point blank shot when Plata got in behind them and blasted it over the bar the one time. So a lot of positives to build it on there. And I think that's probably what they'll look at is that they won't focus so much on the nil, but they will, be happy to get that point and get out of there. Josie looked pretty alert. He had a good opportunity one-on-one with keeper there with a miscue on the throw and was able to just barely get tipped out by fingertips again. So there's another trend that's continuing, I guess. But nonetheless, it's hard to be upset at that result as a TFC fan. I mean, I'm sure people out there could find that because they didn't score, but by and large,
and
it was weird.
They didn't score because Nick Raimondo saved his 29th penalty in Major League Soccer. 29. That's amazing. That's not the amount of penalty he's seen. That's the amount he saved. He saved more penalty than the majority of goalkeeper will see in their entire career in Major League Soccer.
Romaldo's a guy that's just been around forever, eh? Like we were talking about that at the viewing, and it's just him and Beckerman, man. It's going to be weird the day that they're not in that lineup. You forget that Beckerman played for another team. He's so much a part of RSL's culture now. In fact, he played for their biggest rival in Colorado when he started. Right? I believe he actually started with Miami of all teams. So there's how old he's been around. But nonetheless, not the most inspiring performance by RSL at home. It was weird to watch a team bunker at home against TFC. That's not something we're used to. It's usually the other way around over the years. But this, as I said many times, this is not your big brother's TFC. This is a very stacked team that certainly showed that they will get up and in the attack and play to their strengths even on the road this year. So again, I think that's a positive. Of the 3 results, obviously the impact losing is the worst. You don't want to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
But of the 3 results, I think the TFC have to be the most satisfied with the road point to start the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what can you do when Raimondo? It wasn't probably the best penalty that Seba hit. We'll take it because probably you pretty much half the people viewing the game, you could tell which way he was going to hit it when he just started going towards the ball.
Right.
But
at our table when he's going bottom right.
so there you go. So if we can see it, what do you think Raimondo's swing? What do you think? Another goalkeeper, never mind the best goalkeeper to stop penalty in the history of the league. So it's not that surprising. But outside of that, I think you're absolutely right. One tweet by Kurt Larson actually caught my attention for the right reason. Which is it doesn't really happen a lot with Kurt, not us, but usually other people.
Anyway,
exactly. But Kurt said, only really good teams can come out of Riot not losing and still feeling they could have got more, because it's a place that in history, because of altitude, because of the way RSL used to play, it'd be set up and it was intimidating with the Believe chant. It was a fortress. So only good teams come out of the Riot with a point.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that has been a bogey place for TFC over the years. Like they have got their asses handed to them there many times. It's kind of a daunting place to go into. The altitude, as you say, it's a West Coast swing. The time change, and that matters in MLS because you're flying commercial, remember. But they went in and they bossed it. They look like they're playing the role of favorites. That's not something we're used to here in Toronto, but they looked like that reminded me of a Galaxy game through the years when the Galaxy would just walk into anywhere and they didn't care where they were playing. They would just walk in with their heads held high and their tail up and have at it. You take them down sometimes, but they were going to play a full game. And if that's what TFC season is going to look like, the goals will come eventually. This is a pretty stacked team. It does beg the question, though, with the Giovinco penalty thing. And the reason that a lot of people were sort of joking about it is because he always goes bottom right. If he hits it perfectly, then it's going to go in. But you have to, you have to ask yourself if you're the TFC training staff, then maybe they need to work on that. Maybe they need to switch that up. Maybe they even need to put Josie in to take the penalties now.
Because the gig is up. The gig is up.
So we'll see how that one works out moving forward. Hard to talk about nil-nils a lot, but as I said, I think there was some positives there for TFC. Obviously, the Whitecaps, the clean sheet. We talked about the impact. You can leave them well enough alone for now. If you want to go back and listen to Kevin's show from last night, you can do that. But quickly, we touched on it a second ago. We really should talk about Minnesota. I felt bad that night because there's a lot of
you know what?
people that
Matthew Dell mentioned one thing that was interesting. He's like, it was 2-1 for a long period, and when it's come they're like, you know what? It's 2-1. We can maybe play with those guys. We can maybe what did we do? Oh geez. Oh well. Here goes the home opener. No. Here goes the season opener.
Yeah. Look, that's a big, ugly scoreline to hang. And the jury is still out on whether they are, in fact, the worst expansion team of all time.
So far, yes. So far, because this is the worst defeat of an expansion team in the history of Major League Soccer. So, as of right now, Minnesota is the worst expansion of all time, but only by a few goals. The only positive, Duane, in that game is the goal by Superman of his NASL fame. I cannot say Superman until he's proven in the MLS, so every time I will use a nickname, it will be with his NASL fame. But Duane, the goal by Ramirez was created by Yohan Venegas. The best moments offensively for Minnesota were created by Yohan Venegas. It has begun. I'm telling you, Yohan Venegas is going to be a bigger acquisition for Minnesota than we have thought before, and the impact maybe they won't rue themselves because they didn't use him properly, or maybe there was something that he couldn't bring to the table that was needed here with the other players that Montreal did have. He wasn't the best offensive one, so the role, he couldn't necessarily have that role. Other players had it, so there's that in the equation. But him in Minnesota, he is one of the players that comes in, no pressure because he's not named Ibarra, or no pressure because he's not named Ramirez and doesn't have history in that city. He comes out of a place where it didn't work, so he comes in free. And so far, the freedom has been sweet for Yohan.
Exactly. There are pieces there, as we've said. I think that what was exposed on Friday was how the depth and the sort of the lack of familiarity with each other is going to bite them in the butt down the line, and they're going to collapse. When the wheels came off, they came off hard, obviously. 3 goals quickly at the end of that game. And as much as people want to say, yeah, it was only 2-1 there for a while, it still was not the best effort. We'll see what they look like at home. Hopefully for them and for their fans, they don't have a repeat performance. I doubt that they're going to lose 5-1 every week, but my 6-0 pick in the prediction show wasn't too far off, was it?
No,
you were finished with quick talk on Atlanta as well. The 50,000 people, they were in full mood, throwing some beer in the field. That'll happen when you have 50,000 people who are hammered. That's going to take place.
You wanted to have cheap beer, Arthur? That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's don't get too acrimonious about it because it's going to happen everywhere. It's happened here in Toronto. I'm sure it's happened in Montreal as well. You just sort of realize that there's idiots everywhere and move on.
Yeah, exactly.
But the collapse down the end, it's like, welcome to MLS. This is not going to be, snap your fingers and get it done. They're going to have to work for it. But nonetheless,
they look better, though. Like, if you compare them to Minnesota, it's not even a comparison. Like, actually, Atlanta looked like they belonged. They looked like they were going to maybe have a result in that game. And let's face it, the Red Bulls are a good team. We had our doubts because of the way CCL unfolded and the way their offseason went with the departure of Ali Curtis and Dax McCarthy. But you do see the build-up in play. You do see the ideas of Jesse Marsch coming to fruition with some very intense attacking options being created late in that game, which led to the own goal, basically led to the win. And they came back 2 goal, 1 goal down to win in Atlanta, which wasn't easy. Yamil Assad scored the first goal during at the 25th minute, not the 24th, the 25th minute for Yamil Assad with his goal. And then the place goes crazy, and it could have gotten that win. But the Red Bulls worked a little harder. And it's kind of a lesson for Atlanta that even though you came in with big fanfare and a lot of splash and a lot of cash, you can't buy wins, and you have to work for 90 plus minutes.
Yeah, originally people thought it was the 24th minute and they were tweeting at me. I offered to sell the account for $5,000, but no one took it. It's too bad for me. Could have had quite the weekend if that had happened. But nonetheless, and obviously the Houston result surprised a lot of people. Anything else that jumps out over the weekend before we wrap the show up here?
Chicago didn't lose, so that
There you
was
go.
good. David Account with the equalizer at the 74th minute later on in that game. And but Columbus was disappointed because they left point on the field. But for Chicago, like, I'm not alone. A lot of people are predicting Chicago will be, if not in the playoff, close to be, because, well, I think they're due. Yeah, it's an intangible, and there's real soccer reasons why I believe Chicago should be there. But for now, we'll just leave it at, you know what? It's time for them, just for the sake of the Chicago fans, to not be in the bottom. And first step towards not being in the bottom with a point in the first game.
Started from the bottom and now they're
Not
getting a
last.
point.
Exactly.
All right. We're going to keep it short today, a half hour. As we said, Kevin did the whole wraparound show. What do you call that one again? The MLS
MLS
post-game show?
post-game show. Yes, with yours truly every Sunday night, 1 a.m. live on the Sports Podcast Network. You'll see the tab. Click on it, and you can listen to the show live. All the numbers for the studio line will be posted in the next few days for you to call when the lines will be open on Sunday. We'll take your phone calls. We'll give you the scores and anything that happens in the weekend in Major League Soccer.
All right. On that note, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
Stay tuned to the Sports Podcast Network. We're doing a 5 Rings live. We are back in about half an hour or so. You can listen to 5 Rings live on the Sports Podcast Network if you are listening live right now. And for everyone on podcasts, just check your podcast feed on the network to find 5 Rings and talk about some Canadians who are world champion. And until tomorrow, 6 p.m. for Soccer Today, well, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.